Question one, what was your favorite song as a kid? That would have to be Disarmed by Smashing Pumpkins. I remember hearing that song, I think for the first time when I was a teenager. I guess I was like 12 or 13. And it was like the first time I had heard a song that felt like was both a rock song and it was also like classical. And lyrically, I loved the lyrics. I loved the way like the singer was singing it like wholeheartedly, like with his soul. And I just love the lyrics of like the killer in me is the killer in you. Um, I think that like was almost too dark for people when it came out. People were like, "What is this song about?" But I really loved just the way that it brought like darkness and despair, but also like struggling against that and like coming forward through that. Was really really cool to me. One of the teenagers was just like, this is the coolest song I've ever heard because it's taking modern things and the classical elements and it's bringing them together. Second question, what is the best thing about being a parent? So many things to choose from. I think the best thing I'll say about being a parent is what you learn as being a parent. A lot of people, by default, you're a parent, you're teaching your children, and we think of that primarily as like you're teaching your kids these things that they need to grow up and to be better adults. But I mean, in reality, they're teaching you. You don't realize how selfish you are. You don't realize how like so many unknowns that you have in your life. You don't realize how many things that you don't prioritize well, so many things you don't do well, and your inability to teach well. Like even just be able to parent, you need so much help with, and you can buy all the manuals and teaching books in the world. You could fill like your whole house full of books about how to be a parent, and you'd still be you'd just be at a loss because each child is like their own person. They're this own strange human being that's not you and it's not their mom, and you're like, you don't know where they came from once they start bringing that personality. And it's so much joy and pain and struggle and reward. I would say just learning, just the privilege of being able to learn from your kids. And yeah, I'd say that the main thing is learning. Three, what are things that frighten you the most? This is a fun one. I would say the things that frighten me the most, I would put into things that are the unknown or the future. Because that's ultimately what our greatest really fear is. We don't necessarily fear just the dying part. We don't fear pain per se because we've experienced pain. It's all about that unknown, that question mark. Like we don't fear war, we fear what war brings. It brings death, it brings uncertainty, it brings turmoil. We don't fear disease, we fear that suffering. We don't fear like different things that might be negative of itself. It's the consequences they bring and the unknown part of that. We don't know if we're going to get over this cancer. We don't know if this war is going to end peacefully. We don't know, if our finances are going to make it. We don't fear debt per se. We fear what that consequence is going to bring. Tomorrow, am I going to get enough money to pay for that debt? Tomorrow, am I going to be able to like heal that wound or fix that problem? So I'd say what frightens me the most, I'll say, would be all into the unknown category, all things out of my power. Anything within my power that I can have an effect on, that's not necessarily as fearful, because you can fear performance and how people will view it, but it's more the unknown factor. It's more, what will you think? And I don't know that. Like, I know what I'm gonna think. So that unknown, I would say, that things that are unknown, that you either have to find within yourself like a strength to do it, or you have to like acknowledge that I don't have enough strength and I do have an unknown that I don't know, and I have to place that somewhere. It has to go somewhere. So yeah, 4, if you had to teach something, what would you teach? This is an interesting question for me because I've already taught a couple of different things, but I'd have to say, if I had one favorite thing I'd want to teach, it'd probably be just English literature, because it's so broad. I mean, to teach English like you speak English. So you're pretty much saying any kind of book that's ever been written in English, you can bring that as your subject. And I know like you have college courses in 101 and women's lit, but just having the discussions in English literature, being able to go through like human emotions that have been captured so well by authors and scriptwriters and playwriters, and you can analyze that and talk to people about their emotions and how they relate to stories, because the thing is, like, we relate to stories way better than we relate to facts, like figures. You tell someone's story about like a small cat and like how it lost its way, you know, and how it got back somewhere. You're gonna remember the story about that cat way more than you are like, hey, go down, turn down lane A to get to B. That's just how the human brain works. We love stories. So I'd say definitely English or either theater or script writing, and have to be in one of those realms. Even though I'm an artist by trade, I love being able to teach literature and just seeing people open up to that. What was your best piece of advice for living? Best piece of advice for living is, I would say 3 words, is never give up. Never give up. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're gonna fail. I heard someone say one time, if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough. If you're not trying hard enough to where you're constantly failing and you're feeling like you're coming up short, then you're not actually reaching towards what your potential really can be. If you're constantly successful and like, man, I'm hitting the mark all the time, that's because your bar is way too low. Because as humans, we are capable of so much more than we think we are. We just need to not give up. Like, when we have those voices of those people or the naysayers or whatever, the biggest thing is within ourselves when we say, yeah, that's okay. Because someone can never really tell us to give up if we have that attitude of, I'm never going to give up. I'm either going to die doing this, what I'm trying to do, or you're going to like take me away. I'm going to give all my effort. So I do feel like that's the best advice I can give as far as just an advice, like walking in the door, is never give up. And the 6th one, what do you want your loved ones to know about God? I'd say as a Christian, I definitely want them to know Christ and follow Jesus. But I will say, in a simpler answer, I'll say, God loves us. And I think the harder you hold on to that truth, the easier it's going to be able to understand who God is and where you are in the world. It's easier to understand suffering. It's easier to understand purpose. I know in our day and age, like, there's so much talk about like identity and what is my identity and what's my purpose, and I'm unique and how am I unique, and it's almost divisive because you want to put yourself in a category, an adjective or something like that, to try to find some value because you want to be valued. So just knowing the fact that God loves you and just hitting the tip of that iceberg and the knowledge of like someone that created the universe cares about humans on the small little planet in the middle of all this like weird cosmos that we can't find any other life on. God loves us. And if my kids understand that, if they get that God loves them, they're going to, I feel like they're going to understand coming to Christ. They're going to understand who Jesus was. They're going to stand what they're going to prioritize in their life as far as their jobs, their values. That's all going to fall into place, because when you know that God loves you, you're also compelled to love Him and to love others. And if you're letting that go into every facet of your life, it's really hard to screw up priorities. It's really hard to do a big mistake if you're loving the person that's across from you, no matter where they came from and no matter what they've done or what their walk in life is. If you know God loves you and He loves that other person just as much, then it all falls into place for you. You're going to understand a lot of things that you wouldn't understand if you don't come from that starting point. And I know kind of how like we think of the history of the world like there was nothing. I almost feel like there should be a caveat, and God loved. And so now this happened. This crazy thing called the universe happened. So the more my kids hold on to that fact, and if they can grasp that in some way, I feel like they're going to be okay. I feel like any other advice I give them is kind of periphery to, no matter what happens, when our bad things or failed dreams or plans, know that God loves them, and that's never going to change.